Brad and Aidan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be on the show. Looking forward to it.
Mm.
Now, both of you come from very different backgrounds, and neither of you are accountants, as far as I know. But now you're working with the CA, building a business advisory program for small to medium accounting firms. So tell us a bit more about how that all came about.
Well, Michael, first of all, thanks for letting us into the inner sanctum. Yes, you're right. We're not accountants, and it's it shouldn't be. Hopefully, it's not frowned upon by all of your audience. But we certainly have done a lot of work with accountants over the years, and in fact, part of the reason the whole relationship with the CA started is that I've had the pleasure of working with accountants from about the age of 21 through all different forms of business I've involved in, and the conversation started with the CA a little while back, exploring this particular gap in a lot of interest coming back from members to the CA saying business advisory is supposed to be the future. I'd like to grow. I'd like to do more work in that space. It's just not working for us. And ultimately, there was that much demand from it coming back to the CA that they wanted to address it. And I think some of the criticism of the past from the CA has been, that they haven't been be able to provide that sort of relevance and real time and cutting edge experiences in certain spaces that are important to the life cycle of an accountant and the journey of an accountant, and that's something that they've certainly embraced over the last couple of years, particularly with Sonny and the CA Catalyst program. So, he was agile enough to say, well, let's look at this in an interesting way. Let's do something about it. And I'll throw the ball to Aidan in a moment. But Aidan is someone that I've worked with for quite a period of time. We've done a lot of interesting work in this space. Aidan's, in my opinion, probably one of the best in Australia in terms of this notion of a genuine business advisory offering. And again, not an accountant, but certainly able to bring that to life with accounting practices that he's worked with in the past. So I thought, look, let's do this properly. Let's do something with CA in a meaningful, in a practical way. Let's not do something that's a nice to have program where people turn up and get all excited and come out of that and say, well, great, I've been to a program. Now what? Let's do something that actually makes a bit of a difference. And along came Aidan into the show, and we started going from there. But Aidan, do you want to share a bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Brad. And great intro, Brad, as well. And I think because it's a question we get a lot, Michael, to kind of rehash is like, what on earth are these two non-accountants doing teaching accountants to be advisors? And I think it's really an important distinction is that accountancy isn't advisory. Accountancy is accountancy.
Correct. It's a different skill set, isn't it?
Completely different skill set. And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to, I suppose, develop and invest in is the act of consulting and advisory and really offering counsel and designing advice. And I think that's where we have to be really thorough in the understanding of too many phenomenal intellectual individuals sell the activity of a solution, sell a thing, as opposed to selling the counsel and the advisory to come to the strategic outcome of that thing. And that's really the point of difference, is it's being able to create a circumstance within which you can consistently and reliably develop this relationship of advice and offer excellent counsel in line with someone's business direction and where they hope to go using your expert knowledge. I tell accountants all the time, it's like, you have more business being a business consultant than I do. You literally have way more justification for it. It's just that you kind of skip it, is that you never own that relationship of advisory, or we tend to hurry ourselves to delivery of a thing instead of the thing being the act of advisory. And that's where I think that a lot of the feedback we're getting through the CA, and that's my whole bread and butter, is I actually, I don't do any accounting provisions. I don't do any financial controls. I don't do any of that. And most of the clients that come and work with me, their accountants love me because they end up spending heaps of money on clarifying all of the stuff that I need to know to offer really good counsel and advice. So what we're getting back is people are like, wow, we can offer this top tier provision of counsel, and in owning this relationship with the client of counsel and advice and formulating a really powerful direction together, I can also easily transition into all of these other compliance orientated and mid-tier service offerings. And, and that's where I think that's what we're seeing really come back through the pilots and through the CA, is that people are like, holy moly, it's kind of like you own the farm when you own the advisory relationship, I suppose. Yeah.
What sort of advice are we talking about? Like, or what sort of advisory services do you foresee accountants being able to offer?
The short answer to that is it's incredibly dependent on the skill set of the accountant. So when you look at advisory or you look at counsel, it's not information transfer. Okay, it's formulation that leads to information transfer. So I think one of the clients we actually worked with, Brad, we're in the information age, and I think his exact quote was, "If it was only information, we'd all have six packs and Ferraris by now." And that one stuck with me, and I wish I'd thought of it myself. It's so true, and I think that's really important. Is that it's not advisory. Sorry, it's not information. It's understanding, then formulation of solution in line with preferred outcome in most efficient pathway. So, you can shoot from the hip and say, you could offer them really good, financial strategies to their preferred way of managing their business. But that's not what you're selling. That's the outcome of the advisory that you sell from the formulation of advice. Does that? Yeah.
And it's interesting, just to build on that point, the first point that Aidan mentioned there about understanding is usually about determining if you're a fit for an effective business advisor relationship. So your biases as an accountant, or as an ex-marketing professional, or as an in your case, Michael, as an ex-recruiter, you've got all these life experiences and business experiences and education, things that help you build understanding of that particular client. And what happens is you develop an understanding that says, here is where I see your world, what I see in this environment that you can either see and can't address, or you can't see and you haven't addressed. And that comes from a place of curiosity, a place of exploration, a place of leveraging some of those historic experiences that you've had. But of course, it's not your job in that advisory to therefore just land a solution that you've come up with in your own right. It's the co-development of that with your client, such that they feel really comfortable with it. So this is where, as an accountant, accountants who have been really bogged down in process for a long time in their career might find that, hey, I'm stepping back and clients are asking me some really interesting questions. It might liberate them from to be seeing things that they've been touching and working with for a long time, but from an advisory point of view, it becomes really tangible. But until that client starts talking about those things and the tangibility of it, well, that's just depends whether it comes up or not, right?
I mean, I imagine, given where the world is heading, where everyone's being told, look, you should be a niche player, and even for accountants, they're being told to niche down, where specialize in accounting for medical practices or for legal firms or whatever, because the population is obviously growing, and to stand out, you kind of want to be an expert in a particular field. How does that work with and reconcile with that concept of being a business advisor and an accountant at the same time, given that there is, as you said before, people that are marketing experts, business coaches, automation experts, etc., technology experts, and their expertise is really accounting, which is the process of putting together a set of financials, essentially, and tax returns for a whole range of entities. And that's like, well, that's my niche in this world. That's my expertise. Now you're asking me to diversify and be a jack of all trades in a way. How do you reconcile the two?
Michael, the first thing, before Aidan says anything, the first thing is no one's asking you to do anything, right? So if you're an accountant, the first thing I want to establish, and I think Aidan will agree with me on this, is no one's asking you to be a business advisor. That's a choice, right? So that choice requires a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching business. Now, lots of people have gone through that. Going back to your point, technology, marketing, doesn't matter where you come from. No one is forcing anyone to do anything. So from an expertise perspective, that expertise and the positioning of that expertise is an exercise of, a balance between your willingness to go out there and build that capability and be that advisor, and the approach you want to take to building your business. If we look at niching, that's great, and that's something that will maybe establish you in a market. You may decide that diversification is really powerful for you. In fact, my own business has started in a very niche space, and has now 5 different arms, but that's because of the way we decided to establish a logical roadmap for our business based on the things that I was good at that time, right? As a leader and as a business owner and so on. So I think that's the first point to really establish there. But Aidan, I wouldn't mind your 2 cents on that too, mate.
Yeah, totally. And that's such a strong point, Brad, is that like sometimes it's not sometimes it can be perceived as just an accountant, or, it's the importance is not to be something and something. It's like this is a choice to become an advisor that is also an accountant, but you're not an accountant while you're being an advisor. You're an advisor that happens to be an accountant. So to give you a nice understanding is just because I'm a business advisor or a business consultant, that doesn't mean that I'm a jack of all trades. So I don't do any. I'm really clear. I don't do any financial stuff. For me, it's just one, not something I'm really strong at, and 2, it's something that I found I get better ROI and better impact in the businesses I work with when I focus on sales, marketing, leadership, and management. So I niche into a component of business as a business consultant that dictates whether or not I'm a fit for certain clients or not. So that's a really nice way to delineate. If Aidan's going to be a consultant or an advisor for a business, he needs to make sure that when he's reviewing their circumstances and then also comparing their current circumstances to their future position, is his area of skill and advisory and experience really beneficial and aligned to the areas that if they improve in, they're going to probably achieve that target. So as opposed to being someone who does something and then also offers advice around the thing that he does. So that's probably the first thing that's really important to recognize. But and then also, like, when you look at the concept of niching exists because it's easy to buy from someone in a niche. And I think what advisory can sometimes fall into, and the understanding of consulting can sometimes fall into, is it appears to be very generalist. But I actually would say it's generalist so it can become specialized. Is that there's no greater, flaw of an advisor or anyone really in a position of information provision or formulation than to readily give a solution. Good consulting starts with understanding and diagnosing. So you can go to a general practitioner, and a general practitioner is not going to do brain surgery. They're not going to do gut surgery. They're not going to replace your hip. But they're going to be the individual that you meet first that can resolve a lot of your problems and actually improve your position of being through a diagnostic process. And in some circumstances, completely resolve and get you to where you need to. And in other cases, point you in the direction of the people that you need to be involved with. And there's a great example of this in that we worked with a firm, and there's a massive marketing gap, huge marketing gap in the client. And the question was, well, how can we help this client? We shouldn't work with them because it's a marketing gap. And that's completely incorrect. You can still help, but you don't have to do the marketing to help. You can help establish the parameters of what it means to market successfully, the indicators of its being successful financially, what they have to bring to the marketing agencies that they literally present the work to and the need to, and even further highlight the gap that's already been established for a marketing agency to fill. The ability to, like, marketing always kind of gets a bit of a kick in the guts a little bit because too many people buy marketing instead of buying the marketing outcome. If your role as an advisor that happens to be an accountant is to be able to say, whatever marketing you do, it has to be able to generate this level of profitability and demonstrate this ROI on your spend, that's a massively powerful piece of information you can bring to a marketing agency.
I like your analogy, Aidan, the GP analogy. I guess it's, that is equivalent to like a trusted advisor in a community where you don't necessarily need to do the marketing, even be a marketing expert. I mean, if you are, fantastic, because you run multiple businesses, as Brad has mentioned before. Like, if that's your kind of past background, then sure, you can add more value. But otherwise, the way you kind of formulated it is you're there to diagnose and you refer to an expert, perhaps, or
Totally.
send them to an expert. No, that's a really good way to. It's a really good analogy to kind of put in perspective. Now, I guess I was coming back to the point of like where Brad started was you don't have to do anything. What have you found is the motivation for accountants that do want to pursue the business advisory offering? What's motivating them to, to reach out to CA or to want to pursue this avenue?
I see a couple, and feel free to jump in, Brad. Probably the biggest one that kind of comes across my desk is they see that they can do more with clients, or they can see that they could own a position of service provision or counsel with clients, but they can often be a begrudged purchase. So what I mean by a begrudged purchase is clients aren't really looking to invest in the growth of their business. They kind of, unfortunately, sometimes see accountants in a traditional sense as something they have to spend money on. That's one of the things I see, as opposed to, I can't wait to invest with my accountant to grow my business to this destination. That's one that I see quite a lot. Brad?
Yeah, look, I think there's many different reasons, but a few of them is that it's to me the main, probably one of the biggest one is that sort of I'm growing out of accounting. We've established the accounting function. This has been great. I'm a partner of a firm or a founder of a firm or whatever it might be, and that is what it is. And ultimately, I get so much access to my clients. How do I continue to monetize that access to my clients? What can I do with that? So it starts from that place of curiosity, and often, unfortunately, for a lot of these people who've seen that opportunity, some of them have gone into the space of, well, let's now sell an intermediate service, calling it advisory. So they'll sort of go down the path of selling, like a forecasting tool or a platform of some description that might allow them to provide more financial information or financial insight through that information. And so that's usually kind of how a lot of them are starting to migrate, is using tools and systems. And then I think what's happening is those tools and systems aren't being easily purchased by the clients. It's like, okay, I'm your client. You're now telling me to go and buy a tool. What's the ROI on that tool? What do I get for that? Like, well, you get more information. We go, all right, I've got lots of information already. We kind of talked about information obesity before. So the client may not even articulate that, verbally. They may not talk about it, but that's the thing that's going through their mind. So a lot of firms, I think, are seeing that opportunity, seeing the space, seeing the relationship, going, right, there's something that can be done here. And we all know that. I mean, if you're any firm sitting there that's curious about business advisory, listening to this would see that as well. So it's more about, well, how do you do that profitably? How do you do that sustainably? How do you do that in a way that's kind of authentic to the growth of the organization or the client you're working with? So they're probably a couple of things there. There are a few we're working with some larger organizations or individuals in larger organizations who sit in advisory. And there's a skill gap, there's a capability uplift, right? And there's also the same challenge that happens in the larger firms as it does in the smaller end of town, which is selling the thing, going into the client, selling the financial model instead of selling the outcome and the journey and the counsel. And so there's I guess a capability interest that people are starting to see that, I'm curious, I want to be versatile, I want to grow my career. This sounds like a good path. So there's a few different reasons, but they're probably the most pertinent.
So do you think the issue today has been the lack of the offer or the quality of the offer, or is it just a delivery sort of issue that's preventing accounting firms from doing it successfully?
I think it's it's probably a combination of all, but I actually think for me, it's understanding what it is. So I know when I started offering advisory first, it was horrendously intimidating. Like you're positioned in this role of advice for a business, and you have to deal with really, complex and confrontational situations. And it's actually a lot of work. Like, it's not just offering your opinion, it's actually formulating an opinion based on circumstance. And so the appeal of things like tools or products is really nice because that becomes the safety net. almost of what you're selling. And the chat. Well, I'll just be really upfront. The reason why that's not advisory is because it's not advisory. You're selling something that underpins advisory as advisory, and you never truly own that relationship of advice. Now, I'm not saying don't use tools. I'm saying absolutely use tools, but use tools to inform your advisory. So I think to answer your question, I think it's a combination of everything, but I think it all starts with a misrepresentation of what you're actually selling to the client, how you're actually helping them own that relationship with you, why they're spending money with you. People don't pay me money to speak to me for an hour or 2 hours. They pay me money because of the outcome we're going to get over a period of time working together as invested parties on a project for that, and then all the things that follow that. So that's usually the difference. If I was to sell models or tools, then they always question, oh, why are we buying this? What's this for? This is, yeah.
Why do we need you? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And Michael, it can come across really abstract, right? I mean, I think for a lot of very logical, left brain biased, people, and a lot of accountants are very logical in mindset, and the way they work is very methodical. This can be quite kind of out there. It's very, very difficult to say, right, let go of the outcome. Don't worry about the solution. The solution will come when the client tells you what the most important things are to them, and then you'll shape that, and then you'll define that, and you'll make that clearer, and that might even change. And that's scary.
That's true.
That's scary.
Yeah, especially because every client, as Aidan said, is going to have their own set of issues, and if you just go into the situation with just the tools that you have, even though they might not be the right tools for the situation, then you're probably not going to be providing significant value.
Yeah, you're going to have a hard conversation in about 90 days. Yeah.
Now, I believe you guys had a few accounting firms go through your pilot program. What were some of the outcomes that they achieved?
Both of them a fantastic journey and at different stages of their starting points. So if you take it from a consulting or advisory perspective in terms of where we started, they both had outstanding journeys. So, we're working with a smaller firm who, was starting to establish whether they want to be an advisory and what that looked like. Right? They went out there, started to, go through early stages. They were able to progress the formulation of what it looks like to be an advisor. What was interesting, they sort of ran into COVID, got a little bit busy, and now they're sitting there going, great, now we've got this foundation. This is how we'd like to accelerate what we've done from what Aidan, Brad, and Lance have done, and Aidan's back. Yeah. So a great example of foundation set, clear understanding. A couple of clients being one, going through that diagnostic, understanding what a good diagnostic looks like versus a bad diagnostic, seeing what it feels like to lose one, all of that sort of stuff, and then formulating what they see as their kind of offering as they move forward. Through to another example, another firm where the two advisors there winning some quite high profile clients.
I'm very jealous, put it that way. Some big healthy ones, really good ones.
Yeah. So
winning because of the advisory services they had, or
no, winning because of the offering, right? So coming in, the existing client, look, we're seeing this. Are you curious to explore what this might look like to be in an advisory relationship? There's some opportunity, and you're on a journey.
Complex circumstance.
We think we can help. We think we can help, and there's a lot of complexity and a lot of interesting stuff going on, and that was a great way for them to start from a fairly conservative kind of relationship that was trusted, and it was good that they had some trust in those relationships to that next level now, and they're really enjoying themselves.
Can you give us an example, Brad, in terms of so conservative relationship? They started off with, I guess, your typical business services tax service, and they went out to an existing client and offered them a service. Can you just walk us through what they look like? Yeah, what the process, what sort of service was actually offered, and what sort of value was generated for the accounting firm / the client?
Yeah, no problem. So there's probably a few of them, but I'll choose one. Was an organisation where they were family-owned business, very large in the kind of property and construction game. Ultimately, different stakeholders in the family going through different needs and
different
maturing at a different
priorities.
level with different priorities. And with some of the changes going on top of some interesting business opportunities that had started to face them, the CEO and founder was sitting there saying, wow, like I've got all these interesting complex decisions to be made that not only revolve around, the potential acquisition of new business and potential M&A, but related to, the future state of his family in the business, the future state of the different stakeholders, the establishment of a leadership future leadership path for different people in the organisation, even establishing who that might be, and all of that sort of stuff. And again, they're partway through that sort of journey. So it was an interesting formulation of understanding that all the dynamics in that organisation in the first place. Getting clarity on each of those stakeholders and what their future state looked like, and starting to think about what's alignment going to look like in this scenario. It's pretty complicated. On top of that, starting to rationalize some of the existing challenges around an acquisition, current business, what the opportunity cost and the risk might be around some of these particular activities that have sort of gone off and happened, and they're all, again, all done. I can't give away the name of the company or anything like that, but the point is that exploration, that diagnostic process, started from a place of a future state goal. These are things that are important to me as the CEO and major shareholder. These are some of the dynamics at play. Now, it's not a case of going, right, well, just give us your books. Let's look at your books. Well, we've already seen your books, mate. We're your accountant. But it's not a case of just going in and analysing stuff that, logical, all right, first we do this, then we do this, then we do that, sit down and have a meeting, It's going to formulating what does that diagnostic even look like, right? Who do we need to meet? Who do we need to explore? What sort of data and what sort of hypotheses might we have about that data early on that we might look into, and what sort of rocks might we look underneath, and then coming up and saying, well, what does that all mean? How are we going to formulate a kind of journey that makes sense in a prioritized way? So that's a very rushed version of it, Mike. Aidan, anything to add to that? I mean, I try to do these things justice without going into too much detail.
Yeah, it's always careful too, because you don't want to let the cat out of the bag. It's I think you described that circumstance very well, in those very, very complex circumstance with lots of opportunity, varying stakeholders, varying assets that may hang around or not, and different pressures and different timelines. And ultimately, the CEO found himself with decisions to make that were, big, and that's the CEO's responsibility and the founder's responsibility. And the role that in that diagnostic that they were able to achieve is like pragmatic analysis of circumstance in line with future state priorities. And then in that diagnostic itself, it wasn't just a matter of getting to know one another. It was, oh, goodness. So I think I'm back. Yeah, it wasn't just a matter of getting to know one another. Being able to actually design what we have to understand to diagnose the situation at hand. So, and then formulate the solution. Sorry.
And I guess I wanted to understand the program that you guys have, the Catalyst program, the CA. Once they've gone through the program, is that what equips them with, I guess, the tools and the processes that allows them to go through that with a client? Is that one of the outcomes of the accounting firm going through that program?
Yeah, okay. So we actually treat the accounting firm as their initial client. So it's really important to understand that whilst it sounds abstract, it is not absent process and theory and model. But it's being able to have the agility in the delivery of the model that gets a really accurate outcome. So, for example, if someone coughs and sneezes and has a headache, they might have the cold, or they might have, God forbid, meningitis. So you have a diagnostic protocol that helps you indicate criteria and a process of doing that in line with your skill set to make sure that it's accurate. And when someone goes through the accelerator, it's an accelerator. So it's an aggressive approach to get them up to speed, to win work on, but also to understand their own capabilities to move towards this process. Can
you walk us through the program?
Yeah, of course.
Like, so I believe it's 8 weeks. Is that right?
So ultimately, there's understanding consulting and understanding advisory, which is the foundations of it and the adoptions of it. And then there's winning it. So it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to sell it and to win it. And then there's a period of implementation. And jump in here, Brad, as well. We're in, and like really, we really stand by the statement that it's not information, it's implementation. So we have a period of time where people are actively using the information that we've disseminated, and then have the opportunity to come back to us practically on a weekly basis and say, hey, this happened, what do you think happens here? Hey, this happened, what do you think happens here? And do that in a group format and learn from one another. And then from there, it's really about then taking those learnings and understanding how they, as a client, have their representative skill set that can formulate solutions to their clients. So that's probably the most important piece. And then we finish up with a roadmap and an unfolding journey for them as to how they need to continue and expand this independent of the accelerator.
And that development of the roadmap is part of the maturing of that advisory mindset. It's about them going, right, here's the dynamics of my own firm. Here's the dynamics of my situation, whether I'm a standalone operator or whether I'm part of a big monster accounting firm. This is my situation, and based on this, these are the prioritized activities or improvements or uplifts or whatever word you want to call it. That's what I'm going to do, and of course, we play a role in giving you some sense check around that as they exit the program. But the critical piece in that is that they've pressure tested and played with this in a safe way with their clients. They've been testing that with their own firm. They've got the safety of being able to share regularly each week and check in with us as outside of the workshop environment in a practical way, those sorts of situations, and learn by listening to others and learn by the formulation of the solution, not by the thing that happened. And the thing that we'll continue to reinforce through the program is this is not teaching you what to do. This is teaching you how to think so you can work out what to do. And then that's once you get that rhythm right, again, will some firms, some individuals, maybe they will require more support after the program. Maybe there'll be some firms that require, after working things out, that they need to implement different solutions themselves. That's a strong possibility. And equally, some people will walk out of this and be firing and ready to go and completely armed at a level that they feel really comfortable with. So that level of maturity is really dependent on how much people lean into it. In our experience, it all comes down to what their propensity is to make it happen.
Okay. I mean, I think the good thing about the program is you do focus on the fact, or emphasize the fact, that it's not a listening only program. There's a lot of implementation, there's a lot of hands-on work required, and you guys are there to support that. So I think that makes a big difference to many other things that they just go for CPT hours.
Yeah.
I'm curious with the accounting firms that have gone through the program, what were some of the biggest challenges that they had, and I guess how did you help to overcome them?
There's a few challenges. Aidan, do you want to start?
Well, the first thing is everyone's different. But if I was to tell you like the biggest ones, usually, the first thing usually is letting go of the need to know what you're gonna do before finding out what you should do. So that's
that would be hard.
So because like accountants are programmed to know the answer. But that creates diagnostic error, right? So I actually say that would be bad practice if you're trying to be an advisor. So it's letting go of the need to know and selling that I'm going to find out what we need to do. That's the first thing. And then probably the second thing, which a lot of people just struggle with, is actually learning to sell it. Like actually just learning to have a really fair, open, non-pressured conversation about what it is and if it's going to help the client. And it's so astronomically easy when you let go of your own expectations, but until you do that, it's very, very, very hard. So it's not knowing the answer, but finding out the answer and then selling that process.
Yeah, and a little build on that, Aidan, is And I think, we've seen this a few times, not just on these particular these practices, but generally, is when you're selling, the idea is that any client may need your service. And so sometimes we find that there might be this preconceived idea, oh, well, they're not right for advisory, or they're not right for advisory. It's until you've established an understanding and that curiosity between you and your client to go, right, what's that future really going to look like? Where are we going? What's the complexity in that? I mean, obviously, you wouldn't use those exact questions, but once you start to get to that point, that's when you
asking questions.
That's when you establish whether they're the right client. So if you're judging whether someone's going to be a great client before you've got to that level of curiosity, you've probably done it the wrong way.
Absolutely.
And talking about, and I guess the next question is, obviously accountants are very numbers focused, as we emphasized a lot today. What are the benefits for them? Like, I mean, say you, and this is your target market, your typical 2 to 3 partner, 20 staff firm. What would be the benefits they can expect from implementing some of the things that you teach them in terms of actual numbers, like what you've seen or what you anticipate a typical small firm like that would see an uptake of clients / what that translates into numbers, average advisory kind of service, client satisfaction increases, whatever the case may be?
Well,
if you have some numbers that you can share.
A great question. The clients that we were referring to earlier with that really complex circumstance, this morning, Brad, we were chatting. They've covered about 40% of their annual target in 2 months, the annual billable target in 2 months. So like it's
the accounting firm.
Those individuals within the accounting,
or the client.
Those individuals within that, their billable target for the year, those professionals, they've covered 40% in about 2 months. That's purely diagnostic. That's purely in doing the work. And the reason why that happens is you're not trading time for money. Okay. You're trading outcome for money. Okay. So people aren't buying an hour with you. They're buying you partnering with them on the journey towards the outcome. So it has a different representation of value. Now, of course, you can't just like charge willy-nilly. You've got to be realistic about it. But in addition to that, you can do really creative pricing things. So one of the things that I try to do if I see a high growth client is I'll put a percentage growth strategy in. So it's, percentage of dollar after this level of growth. And then you just hold on, so there's phenomenal levels of profitability in that. But the ballpark you should be looking at is like someone who's consulting to maybe 10, 15 clients would be very, very, very light on, like very, 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 very light on in terms of delivery. Should be charging anything between, it should be holding that 4.5 to 5K retainer during diagnostic period, and still have propensity to do compliance orientation and compliance deliverables. But the real sort of like accelerant in this, right, is if I'm in an advisory position with a client and I also own a business that has a compliance delivery, I, from an advisory perspective, can integrally recommend compliance or practical delivery to another component of my business. And subsequently, I get high levels of throughput into additional services. So it's kind of like this little bit of a turbocharger that you put on the top that, from a purely financial perspective, that one is incredibly profitable when you compare it to time because you're charging against an outcome. And two, allows the, I suppose, liberation or lubrication of work towards other services within the compliance components of your business. So yeah, like, and probably the last point on that is the longer you can retain a client and the longer you hold that relationship, one, the more profitable it becomes, and two, the more stable. So my average client time is like 5 years. If they don't become a business partner after about 3 or 4 years, people hang around when they're onto a good wicket. And if you're able to provide continual strategic advice towards growth targets and underpin that with pragmatic delivery of certain components, you lift your fee every year. They engage with you in less frequent, so I have some clients that engage with me once a month for 45 minutes along our plan, and they get used to working together in a partnered format. So yeah, it's without kind of like, getting really grandiose about it. It can be very, very profitable when positioned well and sold well.
So essentially, if I take some of the numbers you just mentioned, like a 4 or 5K retainer per month, you're looking at converting a typical small firm client, which is worth usually 3.5 to 5.5K compliance fee per year, into potentially a 40 to 60K fee annually. So which is, basically of 10x your fee base for that particular client. Would that be an accurate representation?
Specifically focusing on that particular client, right? So the client has to be able to warrant that growth. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So when you look at that type of client, like that type of individual that we're aiming to work with, that size, it's not just because they have that type of business that they're already serving. It's also because they should really have that potential to serve clients, and businesses in a certain bracket that we're looking for. So, you do want to be billing healthily towards an outcome. But let's say if the client is a photographer and it's themselves and one person that's on the periphery that helps them on certain busy days, like they're not going to be a 5K client. Because you can't justify a 60K investment in the growth. So it's all about understanding, if you only have 15 slots per consultant, how do you provide a service and recommendation towards the ones that you can get the greatest ROI on? Yeah.
A nice mindset is just always to think about contrast. What's the future state? How does that contrast from a price point of view? And if that contrast seems really healthy and fair, and it's reasonable to suggest that you can both get to that outcome, then the number will fall out of that. But you're right. If your firm's currently charging 3, 5, 10 grand a year, and you've got clients that are growing, you've got clients that are on an interesting trajectory, or you've got clients that should be growing or are going through difficult times, and yes, could you maximize your yield from them? Like if the advisory offering sound, then obviously that's the numbers stack up pretty clearly from what you can see. But it's about getting it right.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with 2K retainers. There's nothing wrong with 3K retainers. Like it's still phenomenally profitable on the delivery, I think.
Well, even on 2K, that's 24K a year on a typical fee of say 4 or 5K. So you're still 5xing your typical fee revenue, which for an account, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like the value proposition is phenomenal from that perspective for accounting firms, and that's what they look for, right? Because for a lot of them, they're pretty comfortable just doing what they've been doing for many years, and it works, and they make a good living, right? Which is probably the biggest challenge for them to overcome. Is like, well, what I'm doing works. Why rock the boat?
Exactly.
Well, Michael, and it might not be worth rocking the boat, but I think as you can sort of see from Aidan and my mindset is when you talk about those numbers and that value that you're driving through that sort of price point, you've got to be able to stand behind it. You've got to be comfortable with it. And it shouldn't be sort of it shouldn't be a surprise. It should be, that's what the value is for the journey we're going on and the outcome we're moving towards. And that can be a bit of a shift in mindset as well. There might be that imposter syndrome going on. Am I worth charging myself out at that rate? All sorts of things could potentially come up, right? But it's important to embrace it.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone that goes into a new offering probably suffers from imposter syndrome to begin with. So that's understandable. And look, the other interesting thing is it's probably, as you said, people that are actually interested in it. Not everyone will be, and some will actually probably enjoy their role and job and work that they do day to day, and will probably help with staff retention if they get their staff involved in that delivery. So no, I can definitely see the value in that. Would they need to upskill? Like are there areas or that they would need to focus on in terms of learning or developing skill sets or taking courses, I don't know, financial modeling or marketing to be able to deliver the services?
I suppose perhaps, I suppose it's what do you want to keep in-house and what do you want to have outside of the house? One of the main reasons I got really good at marketing is personally, marketing is knowing how to spend money in marketing is a great way to make money. So for me, it was a no-brainer, but that doesn't mean accounting firms should have a marketing department necessarily. I think the modeling is massively symbiotic, right? It's almost like kind of has to be there. So I think definitely upskilling in certain areas is a necessity. And but usually, in my experience, the type of clients that they'll be working with, um, leadership is big. Like one of the things that keeps small business owners is they behave like small business owners. So help having like a practical capacity to help them develop their leadership and management capacity is very, very, very supportive in hitting bigger targets, right? So the short answer is potentially, they don't have to, um, but it's going to strengthen their offering.
Okay. And I guess if an accounting firm wanted to develop the business advisory offering, what are the top 3 tips for making that happen?
I give you the first one straight
Besides
away.
signing up to your program.
Well, there's this program. There's only 20 spots. Actually, there's probably less than 20 spots now. I think we've definitely over halfway. I suppose the first thing is like, you definitely need to practically do some training, right? So if it's not us, I don't know where else you'd go to, but by Christ, don't just have a crack. You need to understand the difference, because it can go really south. Like, how many times you hear people say, I spent a heap of money on a consultant that was crap. It seems to, like, it happens all the time. So just don't even go there. Like, learn the process of offering counsel, learn the process of offering advice, and then go to market. The second tip is, I'll probably give it to you in a bit of a representative piece, is that you are going to change the tool that you are for the marketplace. You are literally reshaping yourself as a service offering, and that is uncomfortable. You are like a hammer that is going into the furnace, and it's going to be hot and confronting and uncomfortable, and you're going to be vulnerable, but you're going to come out as an axe, or you're going to come out as a something. Right. So
I like that
analogy. I use it for my life. so it's important to remember that to hammers, everything looks like nails, right? So if you're trying to pick consulting clients when you're a hammer, they're gonna look like you're only gonna see nails. So be comfortable with the confrontation of this person. Like, be ready to embrace the vulnerabilities of it, and anything that's worth doing is usually hard. It's usually tough. If it was easy, everyone would do it, And I think then the last thing is like, focus on implementation, and reflection. It's the moment you think you've got it is the moment you're going to stuff it up. So if I ever stuff it up, and I try really, really, really hard not to anymore, but I'm still human, it's because I think I've nailed it before I've made sure I've nailed it. So reflection is key. So I still record all my sales conversations. If I'm selling something and it doesn't land, then I need to know why it didn't land. So it's being okay with continually evolving. This really is, in my opinion, the truest form of excellence in service provision, offering excellent counsel and advisory. You kind of just have to be. You can't afford to not be. That, and we get really tight with your time, become an absolute Nazi with your time. Because
speaking of time, Aidan, how long would it take to implement, I guess, the ability to provide the service or the service offering and get it right and actually go to market? Like that's part A, and part B would be, how much time do you dedicate per week to executing the actual offering?
Who's doing the executing? Just some guy who's 100% free time, or?
Well, a typical partner, because one of their biggest concerns is like they're already stretched for time, especially during busy periods. It's like, well, how much time is this gonna take to learn to do your program, to implement the program, and get the offering right?
So everyone's different, right? So it's literally the biggest accelerant in this is the self-reflection and the acceptance, and then also the willingness to do the things that are uncomfortable. Like, so Michael, the amount of times I'll say, don't say this thing, and then they get in there and they go, it's this thing, like like the amount of times that happens, it would blow your mind. So it's the ability to embrace the uncomfortable. It's also like the ability to say, I don't know the answer to that problem that you've just presented me. So like, there's all of these variables, but generally, okay. So like, once again, I'm not prescribing solution, even though it would be really easy to, I'm keeping it bespoke and person specific. You're generally going to want to push about 5 through to know that you got it. But in saying that, like the guys in the pilot, they crushed it. Like those with the big ones, they crushed it straight up. Like they were nailing it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of things in that. There was a really deliberate, honest reflection on what the mindset is, and sort of owning that and being able to articulate it. That happened really quick, right? So some people that can take a while, and there's a resistance to it, and there's holding on to the past, and all sorts of things that might happen. The other thing is creating space, right? So you talk about partners being busy and they're already stretched. Like it's if you're going to invest in change, you've got to realize that there's a bit of a loss before there's a gain. So you're got to let go of something. Typically, what does that mean? I don't know what that is. Depends on every firm. But I think at the end of the day, it's a lot of the time, if I'm spending time on things that are low value, if I want an outcome, I've got to do something different. What does that mean? And that's the question you've got to ask yourself. If you're really busy but you want something different, what's going to change to get there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, but approximately time-wise, like per day, per week, especially for your program, like how much time do you need to dedicate to go through your program to begin with?
Yeah, so from a program point of view, you're talking, only talking 3 hours every kind of fortnight in terms of workshop, and then an hour a week with us. But if I wanted it to work, I'll tell you what, I'd be just my goal would, if I was in the program, I'd be selling diagnostics every day and learning.
I'd be busting chops.
Think about how do I win a diagnostic? How do I get into that situation where I get to really be starting the advisory journey? Because that's where the learning starts.
Yeah.
So to me, if I was indexing my time, I'd be going, great, I've got all this stuff that happens. I've got to streamline that as much as possible. I'm going to win as many clients as I can into the diagnostic phase, and they're all going to move a little bit differently. And that's where there's a bit of a freak out, and that's a bit of that fire, going to the furnace experience. But when you come out the other side of that, then that's where there's the learning. So I would say, if someone's walking out of that program and they've won 5 clients, they've done pretty well. I think they would have probably learned a lot in the practice of that. 2 or 3 good work. But that would be my focus is how do you spend time on the winning, the exploration, the diagnostic design.
I understand. Guys, it's been a wonderful conversation. I'm conscious of the time, so let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us, Michael. It was great.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're a star.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
Good on you, mate.
See you, gang.
Take care, guys.
See you, everyone.
Bye.